For centuries, Japan has guarded a quiet legacy of mental discipline, an inner technology refined by warriors, monks, and master strategists. Known only to a select few, this hidden method was never written in manuals or taught in classrooms. It was transmitted through practice, ritual, and lived experience. Among the modern keepers of this discipline stands Takeshi, a man shaped by the relentless precision of martial arts, the calm of Zen philosophy, and the unbreakable code of the old samurai. Takeshi's art of absolute control is not about controlling others, it is about mastering the battlefield within. In a world overloaded with noise, distractions, anxiety, and emotional chaos, Takeshi's protocol offers a path back to clarity. It teaches you how to command your thoughts, regulate your reactions, sharpen your perception, and reclaim authority over your own decisions. This hidden mind protocol is a system built on discipline, presence, and internal power. When followed correctly, it transforms a drifting mind into a focused weapon, a stressed soul into a centered force, and a clouded spirit into one that sees sharply, moves decisively, and lives with purpose. For generations buried beneath the surface of Japan's documented history, there existed a discipline so subtle and so internal that it rarely appeared in written form. The old masters believed that the deepest arts could only survive through direct transmission, from a controlled breath to the next, from the silent gaze of a mentor to the receptive mind of a student. It was in this living chain of transmission that the early architects of mental discipline forged what later came to be known, only in hushed circles, as the protocol of inner command. Though today it is associated with Takeshi, whose interpretation reshaped its relevance for the modern world, its origins stretch back to eras when a person's survival depended not on physical strength but on the steadiness of one's mind. The earliest fragments of this protocol can be traced to the quiet halls of Heian-era scholars, men who understood that the battlefield was never limited to soil and steel. Japanese courtiers of that time lived in a world where a misinterpreted gesture or a poorly timed remark could alter political alliances that affected entire provinces. In such an environment, clarity of thought was not a luxury, it was a weapon. They trained their minds through precise routines of breath, posture, and attention, preparing themselves to engage in the delicate warfare of words, etiquette, and concealed intentions. Even though their struggles were bloodless, the stakes were as real as any samurai duel. They learned early what Takeshi would later emphasize: the mind must be commanded, or it will betray you under pressure. Centuries later, during the Kamakura and Muromachi periods, this quiet art evolved further, passing into the hands of warriors who realized that the sword was only as sharp as the mind that guided it. The samurai who walked the mist-covered roads of medieval Japan were not merely fighters. They were the carriers of a culture that worshipped discipline. They understood that hesitation could end a bloodline, that panic could cripple an entire army formation, and that fear had the power to unravel duty. To overcome this, warriors began formalizing psychological discipline. They observed that before a battle, their hearts raced, their thoughts scattered, and the noise within their minds grew unbearable. In response, they developed methods to silence this inner chaos. One such technique was mokuso, a seated practice performed before combat or training, designed to clear the mind of hesitation. Another was the measured breathing used to lower one's pulse and heighten awareness. These rituals were not mystical, they were practical mechanisms to give the warrior control over himself when circumstances spiraled beyond human control. The early shogunates learned through countless battles that armies with minds anchored in calmness could withstand storms that would shatter less disciplined forces. It was in these eras that the seeds of the inner command protocol gained their most critical layers: emotional regulation, thought interruption, and the conscious redirection of attention. By the Sengoku period, the age of warring states, mental command had become essential to survival. This was an age when betrayal, nighttime assassinations, shifting alliances, and relentless warfare forced every leader to cultivate an unshakable interior world. Daimyo strategists recorded certain practices in their secret scrolls. Though rarely would they reveal the full method, they described warriors who could stand motionless as flames crawled across shattered rooftops, soldiers who could hear the faintest rustle of an enemy archer in a distant tree, and commanders who made decisions with the calm precision of a winter lake. These were not feats of supernatural power, they were proof of minds trained to obey the will, not the chaos of instinct. The inner command protocol thrived most in the shadows of monasteries, where monks blended warrior discipline with Zen philosophy. They believed the greatest victory was mastery over oneself. They observed the mind as if it were an animal, restless, unpredictable, prone to fear, attachment, and illusion. Through meditation they mapped pathways to stillness. Through hardship they tempered resolve. They documented how the mind responds when deprived of comfort, when pushed to exhaustion, or when forced into silence. These observations formed the backbone of a psychological method based not on brute force but on precision. The monks understood something Takeshi later articulated with modern clarity: the mind can be trained to obey, but only through consistent, intentional practice. During the Edo period, the protocol took on a quieter form. With national peace enforced by the Tokugawa shogunate, the need for battlefield discipline diminished, but the need for mental mastery did not. Samurai without war found themselves serving as bureaucrats, mediators, and administrators, roles that required emotional balance, social intelligence, and strategic thinking. The inner command protocol therefore adapted into a refined art of internal composure. Samurai practiced Seishin Tanren, the forging of the spirit, not through bloodshed but through the daily trials of duty, loyalty, and restraint. They embraced the idea that a turbulent mind was a sign of weakness, while a controlled mind reflected maturity and honor. It was in this period that the principles underlying Takeshi's teachings reached a polished form: the will to remain calm under insult, the strength to make decisions without emotional interference, and the discipline to silence reactive impulses. These were essential for samurai tasked with solving disputes without drawing steel. Their calmness became a social weapon, their silence a technique of persuasion, their self-command a mark of authority. Fast forward to the Meiji Restoration and the dawn of modern Japan, and the world around these ancient practices began to shift rapidly. Yet the protocol survived, not in the form of warrior training, but within the practices of martial artists, military cadets, and scholars of Japanese psychology. It evolved into a system of mental conditioning suitable for a world of complexity rather than battlefields. The emphasis moved from survival in war to survival in the increasingly demanding structure of modern society. The inner world of an individual became a critical frontier as Japan transformed into an industrial nation. Leaders, innovators, and thinkers recognized the same truth the samurai had discovered centuries earlier: mastery of the mind is mastery of one's destiny. In this modern context, Takeshi emerged, not as a warrior of old, but as an inheritor of this long lineage. He approached the protocol with fresh eyes, shaped by contemporary challenges such as information overload, constant distraction, and emotional instability. His contribution was not invention but refinement. He distilled the ancient principles into a system that any person, regardless of background, could practice to cultivate clarity, control, and resolve. In Takeshi's view, the greatest battles of the modern era are fought not in the streets but in the mind, against indecision, anxiety, fear, and the overwhelming noise of a world that pulls attention in 1,000 directions. What Takeshi emphasized most was a truth embedded in Japanese history: the mind reacts automatically unless trained not to. Fear arises before logic. Impulse comes before wisdom. Habit overrides intention. But through the disciplined application of the inner command protocol, a person can shift from being a servant of these automatic responses to becoming their master. Takeshi taught that even in the ancient world, the warriors who survived were not always the strongest. They were the ones who could control their thoughts under pressure. The courtiers who navigated dangerous political schemes were not the most eloquent. They were the ones who did not let emotion distort perception. The monks who found enlightenment were not granted supernatural abilities. They simply learned to quiet the storms within. Across eras, the protocol was never about suppressing human nature, it was about channeling it. Those who followed it learned to pause in the space between stimulus and reaction. They learned to direct their thoughts instead of drowning in them. They learned to observe fear without submitting to it. In doing so, they achieved a form of personal authority that made them unpredictable on the battlefield, unshakable in diplomacy, and deeply grounded in spirituality. Today, Takeshi's adaptation of the protocol stands as a bridge between history and modernity. It reminds people that while the world has changed beyond recognition, the inner world has not. The same currents of fear, distraction, desire, and confusion that challenged warriors of the past still challenge individuals now. And just as warriors, monks, and leaders once relied on disciplined mental training to rise above their circumstances, so too can anyone who chooses to reclaim authority over their own mind. In the end, the protocol of inner command is not merely a relic of Japan's hidden traditions, it is a testament to human potential. It shows that throughout history, those who mastered themselves became forces that shaped eras. And in the hands of Takeshi, this discipline becomes not just historical curiosity, but a living art, one that empowers modern individuals to rise with the same clarity, strength, and inner command that once defined the greatest figures of Japan's past. From the earliest days of Japan's feudal era, the cultivation of focus was not a mere exercise of the mind, it was a matter of survival. In a land frequently torn by warlords, uprisings, and shifting alliances, the samurai discovered that the strength of one's body was only part of the equation. The mind, sharp and unwavering, often determined life or death. This principle, which later came to be articulated as the samurai focus principle, was woven into every aspect of a warrior's training, extending far beyond the practice of swordsmanship into meditation, strategy, and even daily conduct. The roots of this principle can be traced to the early Heian period, when court politics demanded constant vigilance. While the nobility navigated the fragile webs of influence and intrigue, the samurai, then beginning to rise as a distinct class, learned the value of concentrated attention. A single lapse in observation could allow an enemy to exploit weakness, a misread signal to lead to disaster on the battlefield. They realized that the mind, when scattered by emotion or distraction, was a greater vulnerability than the body. It was during these formative centuries that the seeds of disciplined focus were planted, though they were often shrouded in the spiritual language of Zen and ritualized practice. By the Kamakura period, when Japan was governed by the first shogunate, the necessity of mental focus had intensified. The samurai were no longer solely enforcers of local authority. They were defenders of a fragile national order, often called to act swiftly across difficult terrain and under the ever-present threat of ambush. Training methods evolved to include not only physical conditioning, but exercises designed to cultivate the mind's capacity for unwavering attention. Meditation became as critical as swordsmanship, and young warriors were instructed to watch the world with a still mind, to perceive without judgment, and to act without hesitation. The samurai focus principle was thus inseparable from both awareness and presence. It was the art of aligning thought, observation, and action into a seamless, disciplined flow. During the Muromachi period, this principle was further refined. As wars between rival daimyos intensified, battles were no longer fought purely in the chaos of mass combat, but in the subtle interactions of units and the deployment of tactics. Samurai learned that the outcome often depended on the ability to maintain focus amidst confusion, noise, and fear. Those who could anchor their attention on a single objective, be it the movement of an enemy commander, the positioning of archers, or the timing of a coordinated assault, gained a decisive advantage. Focus was trained not as a mental abstraction but as a skill applied in life or death scenarios. Samurai would spend hours in motionless observation, tracking patterns in nature or enemy behavior, conditioning their senses to detect the slightest anomaly. Every movement, no matter how minute, was an exercise in sharpening concentration, teaching the warrior to eliminate distractions and maintain a constant awareness of the unfolding moment. The Sengoku period, the age of warring states, was a crucible in which the samurai focus principle was tested and perfected. In this era of near-constant warfare, daimyos commanded armies that numbered in the tens of thousands, and the battlefield was an intricate dance of cavalry, infantry, archers, and surprise attacks. Samurai who could not maintain laser-like attention found themselves cut down in seconds. Mental distraction was fatal. Hesitation invited disaster. Therefore, the samurai focus principle evolved into a disciplined regimen that combined meditation, ritualized physical drills, and strategic study. Warriors were taught to focus on a single target with the clarity of a flowing river, unchanging, unyielding, and entirely present. Their training was designed to cultivate an ability to isolate what was essential, to discard irrelevant thoughts, and to act decisively. In essence, focus became a weapon as formidable as the katana itself. The influence of Zen Buddhism was central to this development. Zen emphasized presence, mindfulness, and the mastery of attention, principles that seamlessly integrated into samurai training. Meditation was not simply a spiritual practice, it was a strategic exercise in self-discipline. Through seated meditation, breathing techniques, and contemplative reflection, the samurai learned to center their awareness on the present moment, to still the turbulence of desire, fear, and distraction. This mental clarity allowed for the precise execution of skill under pressure. Whether in combat or in navigating the political complexities of feudal society, Zen teachings reinforced the understanding that true mastery required the mind to be both fully alert and fully controlled, capable of perceiving reality without distortion. In addition to meditation, samurai employed physical and environmental exercises to sharpen focus. Training in the dojo often involved repetitive drills executed with precision and attention to detail, where even minor deviations were corrected with strict discipline. Weapons were wielded not only for offense and defense, but as instruments to hone concentration. Archery, in particular, was a cornerstone of the samurai focus principle. The archer had to control breath, posture, and thought simultaneously, aligning mind and body perfectly before releasing an arrow. Each shot was a test of internal stillness and external awareness. The ability to maintain focus through repetitive practice forged an unshakable mental discipline that would carry over to all facets of life. The Edo period brought peace and stability under the Tokugawa shogunate, yet the samurai focus principle did not lose its relevance. With large-scale battles replaced by social and administrative responsibilities, samurai redirected their attention toward governance, ethical conduct, and artistic pursuits. Here, focus became not merely a martial skill but a philosophical and practical framework for all action. The ability to direct attention without distraction became a measure of personal honor and social efficacy. Samurai engaged in calligraphy, tea ceremony, and strategic games such as Go, all of which demanded sustained attention and cultivated the mind's capacity for controlled thought. Focus was no longer exercised only on the battlefield. It was integrated into the very fabric of everyday life, shaping character, judgment, and presence. It was during this era that the concept of Ikegyo Zamai, complete immersion in a single action, emerged as a core aspect of the principle. Whether drawing a sword, writing a character, or performing a ceremonial ritual, the samurai trained to channel all energy and awareness into one continuous flow. Distraction was a weakness, singularity of focus was a strength. This cultivated not only efficiency and skill but also a deep sense of clarity and inner authority. The practice became a mental discipline that forged resilience, patience, and precision, qualities essential to both survival and excellence in any endeavor. As Japan transitioned into the modern age, the samurai focus principle found new relevance in education, martial arts, and leadership. It became a blueprint for cultivating attention in a rapidly changing society, where the ability to concentrate amidst the noise of industrialization and social transformation was increasingly vital. Takeshi's adaptation of this ancient principle distilled centuries of historical practice into a method applicable to contemporary life. He emphasized that while the external battles of war might be rare, the internal conflicts of distraction, indecision, and overstimulation are universal. By adopting the same rigorous mental habits as the samurai, individuals could sharpen perception, sustain attention on what truly matters, and achieve mastery over their own actions and choices. At its core, the samurai focus principle is an acknowledgement that human potential is unlocked not by scattered effort but by directed intent. Historical records, anecdotal accounts, and surviving training manuals all demonstrate that the most effective warriors were not those with raw strength alone, but those capable of directing their minds with unwavering precision. They could anticipate moves, act decisively under pressure, and maintain composure when confronted by fear. This principle also permeated the culture of leadership, strategy, and art, revealing a profound truth: mastery of attention is inseparable from mastery of self. Takeshi's work modernizes this timeless wisdom, translating it into practical exercises for mental clarity, discipline, and purposeful action. Ultimately, the samurai focus principle is more than a historical artifact. It is a testament to the enduring power of directed attention. Across centuries, from the fog-covered battlefields of Sengoku, Japan, to the serene gardens of Edo, warriors, monks, and scholars cultivated focus not as an abstract ideal but as a practical skill, essential to survival and excellence. Takeshi's articulation of this principle continues this lineage, reminding modern practitioners that the mind, disciplined and directed, can achieve feats that raw talent or effort alone cannot. By understanding and applying the samurai focus principle, one enters into a continuity of history, one that links the wisdom of centuries past with the challenges of the present, demonstrating that mastery begins within, and that absolute control of attention is the gateway to mastery in every aspect of life. In the annals of Japan's storied past, the mastery of emotion was considered as essential to survival and honor as the mastery of the sword. Long before the modern era, warriors, monks, and rulers understood that uncontrolled emotion could devastate the best laid plans, ruin reputations, and even cost lives. This understanding was neither casual nor theoretical. It was forged in the crucible of centuries marked by warfare, political intrigue, and the rigorous demands of social hierarchy. The principles that later came to be distilled into what we now call emotional regulation through Zen were cultivated with relentless discipline, emerging as a cornerstone of Japanese mental and spiritual tradition. The origins of this discipline trace back to the early monastic communities of Japan, particularly those influenced by Zen Buddhism, which arrived from China during the Kamakura period. Zen emphasized direct experience over scholastic learning, stressing the importance of presence, observation, and self-awareness. The monks understood that the mind, if left unchecked, is prone to turbulence, anger, fear, attachment, and desire cloud judgment, weaken resolve, and invite suffering. Their solution was systematic training of attention and awareness, which allowed practitioners to observe emotions without becoming entangled in them. This approach formed the foundation of emotional regulation, turning inner turbulence into a field for disciplined cultivation rather than a source of weakness. By the time the samurai emerged as a dominant force in Japanese society, these principles had become inseparable from martial training. The battlefield revealed the devastating consequences of unregulated emotion. A warrior gripped by fear might falter at the moment of confrontation. One consumed by anger could strike recklessly, inviting retaliation. Even the most skilled swordsman could be undone by his own mind. Samurai therefore integrated Zen practice into their daily regimen, learning to recognize emotional impulses as they arose and to observe them with a calm, detached mind. This was not passive suppression, but active engagement. The emotion was acknowledged, its source understood, and its influence managed, allowing reason and intention to guide action. Emotional regulation became as vital as swordsmanship, for a clear mind allowed for precise decisions under the most extreme conditions. The Muromachi and Sengoku periods, with their near-constant warfare, elevated this principle to a critical art. Daimyos relied not only on armies but on generals and retainers capable of maintaining emotional equilibrium under extreme stress. Historical accounts describe samurai standing amidst the chaos of battle, swords in hand, blood flowing around them, yet moving with calm deliberation, responding to threats with clarity rather than impulse. Such mastery of emotion was cultivated over years of rigorous training, blending meditation, breathing exercises, and ritualized drills. The samurai learned that fear could be acknowledged without allowing it to dominate, that anger could be channeled into focus, and that despair could be transformed into resilience. In this context, emotional regulation was inseparable from strategy. The ability to act with composure could turn the tide of war. The integration of Zen principles was especially significant in this process. Zen meditation, or Zazen, trained practitioners to focus on the present moment, observing thoughts and feelings as transient phenomena rather than as dictates of action. By sitting in silence and observing the flow of the mind, samurai and monks alike developed a heightened awareness of their emotional landscape. They learned to recognize the subtle onset of fear or frustration before it could erupt into chaos. Through repeated practice, they cultivated an inner stability that allowed them to respond to circumstances rather than react impulsively. This form of emotional intelligence, cultivated centuries before the term was coined, became a hallmark of the disciplined warrior and the enlightened practitioner alike. During the Edo period, when the swords of Japan grew largely ceremonial and warfare less frequent, the focus on emotional regulation shifted from survival in combat to excellence in social and bureaucratic life. Samurai were expected to navigate complex social hierarchies, mediate disputes, and uphold honor without succumbing to personal impulses. The Zen-based techniques for managing emotion became vital for maintaining authority and social cohesion. Practices such as tea ceremony, calligraphy, and archery were not merely artistic endeavors, they were exercises in controlled presence, requiring participants to regulate emotional responses to frustration, fatigue, or failure. A samurai who lost composure during a ceremonial performance risked damage to his reputation as severely as one who faltered in battle. Historical texts from this period detail methods used to cultivate emotional equilibrium. Breath control, often synchronized with movement or ritual, became a primary tool for managing internal states. Focused attention on the mechanics of action, the swing of a sword, the brushstroke of a character, the precise placement of an arrow, served as a vehicle for redirecting attention away from distracting emotional impulses. Even the practice of walking meditation, or kinin, taught practitioners to carry mindfulness into motion, reinforcing the principle that awareness and regulation of emotion are not confined to stillness but must permeate every action. Emotional mastery was thus cultivated as a continuous practice, integrated into daily life and all tasks, from the simplest chores to the most complex ceremonial or martial activity. The late Edo period and the Meiji Restoration marked significant cultural transitions, yet the importance of emotional regulation remained a central tenet in the cultivation of personal strength. Samurai who adapted to new roles in government, education, and industry continued to rely on techniques derived from Zen to navigate stress and maintain clarity. The principle's adaptability demonstrated its fundamental value whether on the battlefield, in the council chamber, or in the classroom. The ability to regulate emotion allowed individuals to act with consistency, integrity, and strategic foresight. Emotional regulation became not merely a personal tool, but a social necessity, shaping leadership, diplomacy, and cultural production alike. Takeshi's adaptation of these historical practices into modern applications builds directly on this lineage. He observed that contemporary life presents its own forms of stress and distraction, which, while less overtly violent than battlefield conditions, are psychologically demanding in comparable ways. The incessant flow of information, the pressure of expectations, and the internal turbulence of conflicting desires mirror the emotional challenges faced by the samurai. In this context, the Zen-based approach to emotional regulation remains profoundly relevant. Takeshi's method emphasizes active observation of emotional states, the cultivation of presence and the deliberate redirection of attention. The goal is not suppression, but mastery, an ability to experience emotion without being enslaved by it, to respond with deliberation rather than reflex. Historical anecdotes illustrate the practical outcomes of this mastery. Accounts of samurai who maintained composure in the face of ambushes, assassinations, or political betrayal underscore that emotional regulation is a survival skill as much as a moral discipline. The same principles applied to monks enduring physical austerities or students pursuing intense study. In all cases, the ability to observe and control the inner life determined effectiveness, endurance, and success. Zen provided the framework, but disciplined practice, repetition, and integration into daily life transformed theory into tangible capability. Emotional mastery became not a matter of temperament, but of cultivated skill. Across centuries, the lessons of emotional regulation through Zen reveal a profound understanding of human nature. Historical practitioners recognize that emotion is a powerful force capable of shaping perception, decision-making, and action. Left unmanaged, it could undermine even the most skilled or powerful individual. Yet with training, it could be harnessed, refined, and integrated into purposeful action. The cultivation of emotional equilibrium fostered resilience, sharpened judgment, and strengthened character, creating individuals capable of responding with clarity, precision, and authority in the most challenging circumstances. The continuity from historical practice to Takeshi's modern protocol demonstrates the timelessness of this principle. What began as a survival skill for warriors and monks has become a method for achieving balance, mental clarity, and personal effectiveness in the modern world. The techniques, meditation, breath control, focus on task, and mindful observation, remain unchanged in essence, though adapted to contemporary contexts. They teach that the path to mastery begins not with external conquest, but with the regulation of the inner landscape, the management of fear, desire, anger, and distraction. By embracing these practices, one aligns with a centuries-old tradition that has empowered individuals to face adversity with unshakable calm and unwavering purpose. Ultimately, emotional regulation through Zen is a bridge across history, connecting the samurai of feudal Japan, the monks of remote monasteries, and the modern practitioner. It embodies a philosophy that recognizes the mind as both battleground and instrument, that honors the interplay of observation, awareness, and disciplined action. Takeshi's interpretation is a continuation of this lineage, emphasizing that the mastery of emotion is not a passive state but an active, cultivated skill. By understanding the historical depth of this practice, one appreciates that the ability to command one's emotional life is not merely a personal advantage. It is a heritage of centuries, refined through struggle, discipline, and insight, available to those who seek the same clarity, control, and strength that shaped the greatest figures of Japan's past. In the long and intricate tapestry of Japan's history, the concept of deliberate action has always occupied a central place in the culture of warriors, statesmen, and thinkers. From the earliest samurai to the sophisticated strategists of the Edo period, it was understood that the measure of a person's effectiveness lay not solely in strength or intelligence, but in the ability to act with precision, foresight, and unwavering intent. The principle of deliberate action, which Takeshi later distilled for contemporary application, was forged over centuries in the crucible of survival honor and the exacting demands of a society that valued discipline above all else. During the Heian period, as the courtly aristocracy navigated the delicate webs of political power, deliberate action was a skill cultivated for social survival. In a society where a single misstep in speech, gesture, or timing could result in disgrace or displacement, courtiers learned to observe, plan, and execute every movement with careful consideration. They understood that impulsive acts, whether born of anger, desire, or fear, could destabilize alliances and undo years of careful cultivation. The seeds of deliberate action were thus sown not in the heat of battle, but in the quiet corridors of governance, where measured intent proved as powerful as a sharpened blade. This early understanding of strategy emphasized patience, observation, and timing, laying a foundation that would later guide the samurai in their martial and political endeavors. As the Kamakura period gave rise to the first shogunate, the principle of deliberate action gained new significance. The samurai class, tasked with enforcing law and maintaining order, realized that strength alone was insufficient to achieve lasting victory. In warfare, in the administration of estates, and in matters of diplomacy, every decision carried weight. Historical accounts describe commanders who would pause for hours or even days before committing to action, observing patterns in the movements of allies and enemies alike. Their aim was not inaction, but the cultivation of clarity. the ability to assess all factors before acting with precision. This approach transformed uncertainty and chaos into calculated opportunity, establishing a standard for the disciplined application of strategy that would endure for centuries. The Muromachi period, with its rise of regional warlords and complex feudal rivalries, tested the principle of deliberate action under extreme conditions. Battles were fought not only with swords and spears but with intelligence, deception, and timing. A hasty decision could lead to catastrophic loss, while a measured, carefully executed maneuver could alter the outcome of an entire campaign. Samurai who mastered the art of deliberate action were able to anticipate the movements of their enemies, manipulate perception through fates and misdirection, and strike decisively at the precise moment that would maximize advantage. These practices were grounded in centuries of observation, trial, and disciplined repetition, demonstrating that action divorced from strategic intent was ineffectual and often dangerous. Central to this historical evolution was the influence of Zen philosophy, which intertwined seamlessly with the martial ethos. Zen teachings emphasized mindfulness, presence, and the clear observation of reality, qualities essential to deliberate action. Through meditation and contemplative practice, samurai learned to suspend reactive impulses, allowing reasoned judgment and situational awareness to guide behavior. The space between stimulus and response, recognized as a critical moment in both spiritual and martial disciplines, became the arena in which deliberate action was cultivated. By observing the mind and understanding its tendencies, the practitioner could act with calm decisiveness rather than reactive emotion. This interplay between internal discipline and external execution became the hallmark of strategic mastery. During the Sengoku period, the age of warring states, deliberate action was refined into a systematic approach that integrated observation, timing, and execution into every aspect of life. Commanders studied terrain meticulously, analyzing hills, rivers, and fortifications to determine the optimal moment for engagement. Warriors trained to delay instinctual reactions until conditions were favorable, maintaining a calm mind in the midst of chaos. The deliberate application of skill and strategy was emphasized over brute force. History records that smaller, disciplined forces often triumphed over larger, impulsive armies through precise, well-timed maneuvers. These lessons were codified in both oral instruction and secret treatises, forming the intellectual backbone of samurai conduct. In addition to battlefield application, deliberate action extended into social, cultural, and administrative contexts. During the Edo period, as Japan experienced prolonged peace, the samurai adapted these principles to governance, commerce, and ceremonial life. Leadership required careful observation, thoughtful planning, and the timely execution of decisions. The practice of deliberate action was embedded in daily routines, whether overseeing agricultural production, negotiating disputes, or managing retainers. Samurai applied the same principles that had guided warriors on the battlefield. The ability to act decisively yet thoughtfully became a marker of authority, wisdom, and honor, demonstrating that strategy was as applicable to civil affairs as it had been to war. The practical techniques for cultivating deliberate action were diverse and rigorous. Samurai were trained to evaluate all available information before committing to action, considering both immediate consequences and long-term effects. Exercises in patience, situational awareness, and foresight were central to training, often taking the form of simulated combat, strategic games such as Go, or complex ceremonial drills. These exercises honed the mind's capacity to calculate, anticipate, and execute without hesitation. Even small tasks were approached with intent and precision, reinforcing the understanding that deliberate action was not limited to moments of crisis but was a continuous practice integrated into every aspect of life. Takeshi's modern interpretation of these historical practices emphasizes the applicability of deliberate action to contemporary challenges. In a world overwhelmed by rapid information flow, constant distraction, and competing priorities, the ability to act with clarity, purpose, and timing is more critical than ever. The principles developed over centuries of Japanese history provide a framework for managing complexity, making decisions under pressure, and achieving goals with efficiency and precision. Through mindful observation, strategic assessment, and intentional execution, individuals can navigate modern challenges as effectively as samurai navigated the uncertainties of their era. Historical accounts illuminate the enduring power of deliberate action, from generals who orchestrated complex battlefield maneuvers, to courtiers who secured influence through careful calculation, to monks who applied disciplined observation to spiritual practice. Deliberate action has always been a mark of mastery. In every case, the key was the integration of awareness, patience, and execution, to act without haste, yet without delay, to observe without distraction, to move decisively when the moment was ripe. This philosophy, deeply embedded in Japan's historical consciousness, demonstrates that effectiveness is rarely a product of speed or impulse alone, but of thoughtful, purposeful, and disciplined action. Across centuries, the strategy of deliberate action reveals a profound understanding of human nature and societal dynamics. Those who cultivated this skill were able to maintain composure under stress, anticipate the consequences of their actions, and respond with precision to rapidly changing circumstances. The practice required both mental discipline and physical readiness, linking the inner cultivation of attention and awareness with external expression and execution. Deliberate action, therefore, was not merely a tactical principle but a holistic approach to life, encompassing thought, emotion, and behavior. The continuity of these practices from historical Japan to modern application highlights their timeless relevance. While the context has shifted, from feudal warfare to corporate strategy, from political intrigue to personal development, the underlying principles remain consistent. Takeshi's articulation of deliberate action draws directly from this lineage, emphasizing observation, planning, and precise execution as the keys to mastery. By cultivating these skills, individuals can navigate modern life with the same clarity, composure, and strategic insight that enabled historical figures to shape the course of their societies. Ultimately, the strategy of deliberate action embodies the intersection of history, philosophy, and practical skill. It reflects centuries of accumulated knowledge about the mind, human behavior, and the dynamics of power and consequence. From the battlefields of the Sengoku period to the tranquil gardens of the Edo era, from the corridors of political intrigue to the inner discipline of Zen meditation, deliberate action has been a cornerstone of Japanese thought and practice. Takeshi's modern adaptation demonstrates that this principle is not bound by time or circumstance. It is a living framework for effectiveness, resilience, and mastery, connecting contemporary individuals to a lineage of focused, disciplined, and purposeful action that has shaped generations of warriors, leaders, and thinkers throughout Japan's history. In the annals of Japan's history, the pursuit of self-mastery has been regarded not merely as a personal aspiration, but as the highest calling of the warrior, the monk, and the scholar alike. From the earliest days of feudal society, those who sought true authority recognized that external power, territory, wealth, or military might was fleeting unless paired with command over the self. The path to absolute self-mastery, later articulated in modern terms by Takeshi, is the culmination of centuries of disciplined practice, philosophical reflection, and rigorous training that shaped the finest figures of Japanese history. It is a path that demands unwavering commitment, a keen understanding of the mind, and the courage to confront one's own weaknesses with honesty and persistence. The earliest indications of this pursuit can be traced to the Heian period, when courtly life demanded not only intellect but emotional composure. Aristocrats understood that their reputations, influence, and survival depended upon self-controlled decorum and the management of impulses. A momentary lapse in judgment could result in exile, disgrace, or loss of favor. Within this environment, individuals began developing internal disciplines to regulate thought and action, to cultivate patience, and to refine judgment. This early form of self-mastery emphasized awareness of one's own tendencies, the deliberate shaping of conduct, and the constant monitoring of both internal and external responses. It laid the foundation for the later samurai ethic, where self-command would become central to life and duty. With the emergence of the samurai class during the Kamakura period, the stakes of self-mastery became life and death. The battlefield, with its unpredictable dangers and relentless challenges, was both a testing ground and a teacher. Samurai discovered that skill with the sword was insufficient if the mind could be shaken by fear, anger, or uncertainty. Those who could remain composed, deliberate, and clear-headed in the face of chaos were far more likely to survive and prevail. In these circumstances, self-mastery encompassed the regulation of emotion, the focus of attention, and the cultivation of disciplined thought. Warriors were taught that the external world could not be controlled, but mastery over one's own reactions and decisions was attainable and indispensable. This principle became a defining feature of the samurai identity. To conquer oneself was to conquer all obstacles before them. The Muromachi and Sengoku periods further amplified the necessity of internal authority. With constant warfare, shifting alliances, and the ever-present threat of betrayal, the disciplined mind was the true instrument of survival. Samurai engaged in rigorous training to forge resilience, endurance, and clarity. They studied both strategy and philosophy, combining martial drills with meditation, reflection, and ethical instruction. Zen Buddhism provided the conceptual framework, emphasizing mindfulness, awareness, and the transcendence of reactive impulses. Monks and warriors alike practiced stillness and observation, learning to witness fear, desire, and anger without being dominated by them. Through repetition and reflection, they cultivated the ability to act decisively and consistently, regardless of external circumstances. Absolute self-mastery, therefore, was both an internal and practical skill, guiding thought, emotion, and action alike. The Edo period, characterized by relative peace and social stability, provided a new context in which the pursuit of self-mastery could be refined beyond the immediacy of battle. Samurai now occupied roles as administrators, scholars, and advisors. The exercise of self-mastery became essential in governing others, maintaining social order, and preserving personal honor. Practices that had originated as battlefield techniques, meditation, calligraphy, tea ceremony, discipline training, were adapted to cultivate the mind and spirit in peacetime. The principle of shugi, rigorous self-discipline, was central. One sought continuous improvement, the refinement of character, and the alignment of personal conduct with ethical and philosophical ideals. Self-mastery was no longer purely defensive, it became a path to personal excellence and societal influence. Across these centuries, historical texts and anecdotal accounts illustrate the multifaceted nature of self-mastery. Samurai and monks alike were to observe their thoughts as transient phenomena, to recognize impulses before they dictated action, and to channel energy with precision and intention. Emotional regulation, focus, ethical discernment, and strategic thought were integrated into a unified practice. Mistakes were not merely failures but opportunities for learning. Adversity was a teacher, and reflection was as essential as action. In this way, the cultivation of self-mastery became both a philosophical and practical undertaking, guiding individuals to live with purpose, clarity, and resilience. Takeshi's modern interpretation of this historical lineage emphasizes that the principles of absolute self-mastery remain profoundly relevant. While the battlefield may have changed from physical confrontation to the psychological challenges of modern life, the core truths endure. Individuals are faced with distractions, internal conflicts, and the pressures of a complex social and professional environment. The ability to govern one's mind, regulate emotions, and act with deliberate intention is as critical today as it was in the feudal era. By practicing self-mastery, one cultivates resilience, clarity, and confidence, transforming internal discipline into practical power and influence. The techniques for cultivating self-mastery historically were rigorous and comprehensive. Samurai practiced repetitive drills to synchronize mind and body, honing precision in thought and action. Meditation allowed observation of mental patterns and the cultivation of detachment from reactive impulses. Ritualized practices such as archery, tea ceremony, and calligraphy fostered patience, presence, and attentional control. Ethical instruction reinforced the alignment of actions with values, teaching that mastery of self is inseparable from moral responsibility. These practices were not isolated. They were integrated into daily life, creating a continuous process of refinement that shaped character, perception, and decision-making. Self-mastery was thus both a lifestyle and a disciplined training regimen. Historical accounts provide vivid examples of the results of such training. Samurai who faced overwhelming odds in battle demonstrated extraordinary composure and precision. Monks enduring austerities displayed unshakable patience and mental clarity. Leaders navigating political intrigue maintained authority and influence through calm deliberation and strategic insight. Across these examples, the common thread was the cultivation of self-command, the ability to act with purpose, to observe and manage internal states, and to maintain consistency in thought and behavior. This historical legacy informs Takeshi's approach, highlighting that self-mastery is neither innate nor accidental. It is the product of deliberate, disciplined, and sustained practice. Self-mastery in its highest form encompasses every dimension of human life. It is the ability to recognize and regulate emotion, to focus attention, to anticipate consequences, to act decisively, and to align behavior with values and purpose. The historical record demonstrates that those who attained this level of mastery were not only effective in immediate tasks but influential across generations. Their clarity, composure, and discipline allowed them to shape events, inspire others, and endure challenges with resilience. Absolute self-mastery was thus both a personal achievement and a societal asset, reinforcing the interconnection between inner authority and external effectiveness. The continuity of this principle from historical Japan to modern adaptation underscores its timeless significance. Takeshi's teachings emphasize that self-mastery is accessible to anyone willing to engage in disciplined practice. Through meditation, focused action, ethical reflection, and the cultivation of awareness, individuals can achieve a level of internal command that empowers every aspect of life. The principles developed over centuries, through the trials of samurai, the contemplation of monks, and the governance of leaders, provide a framework for navigating the challenges of contemporary existence with composure, clarity, and purposeful action. Ultimately, the path to absolute self-mastery is a journey that spans the inner and outer dimensions of life. History demonstrates that mastery over one's mind and behavior is the foundation upon which all external accomplishments are built. The greatest figures of Japan's past, warriors, scholars, monks, and leaders, achieved distinction not merely through skill or circumstance but through relentless cultivation of self-command. Takeshi's modern articulation preserves this lineage, translating centuries of wisdom into practical methods for achieving clarity, control, and excellence. By walking this path, one joins a continuum of individuals who have shaped history through disciplined attention, deliberate action, and mastery over the self, proving that true power begins not in the world outside, but in the governance of one's own mind, heart, and will.